Okay, good. So we're back. So let's begin typing here. And so let's begin to code a bit of HTML here. And I'm working with my students to get it focused properly, which I don't know if that's going to happen, you know. So let's jump in. This is good enough for now. So we want to make our meta car set, our character set, UTF-8, and these are going to come up almost by standard. And some other meta characters that I can add here, which will help search engines to sort of describe what's happening here. You know, I can add in my author tag, and the value of that, you know, can be my name, and that can help in the indexing of my page. There's a bit more that I would need to do to enable this page to be, you know, searched and scoured by search engines, but this is some of the meta tags that we want for the search engines to find. So let's get a descriptive title here that'll appear at the top of the page. And then we'll dip inside here. Now you notice there's a difference between the head and the body. The head is really where a lot of the configuration information for the site exists. And so let's say link href, and I'm going to direct that to the CSS folder where my bootstrap .css is located. And I'm going to tell the browser that that's going to be my style sheet. Very good. And that'll be the end of my head. And I want to be backing up as I do things. And that really reflects the kind of architecture of the website. Now this index may need to be elevated so that it's right next door to the CSS. So for example, that HTML may need to be elevated somewhat. But right now I think the web content's okay. So we'll debug that. We may need to grow up and not put it into the web content folder. But now we're going to begin upon the body, and we're going to say, and this is a comment. I'm going to call this my main. It's called my main jumbotron. The jumbotron is going to be a huge initial header that's going to be very distinctive, and it'll be the sort of the point of emphasis. And so we're going to create what's called a div that's using a class that's called the jumbotron class. Now remember, the purpose of this, of me posting this to YouTube, is that you're not under any pressure to kind of code along with me. I know coding along is fun and I encourage it, especially if that's the way that you learn, but my purpose is I'm not going to slow down. I'm really going to go fast so that stuff goes into your brain. And so you shouldn't feel the need to accelerate to try to catch up with me. It'd be better that you just kind of hang out a little bit, and then when you try to code with the YouTube in a minute, maybe during our lab, which we'll try to do in the second half of the class. But I'm not going to slow down so it's like, okay, now type the letter D. Not going to happen. It may not be propitious for you to try to keep up. Just kind of hang out a little bit, watch what happens. Now this Jumbotron class is going to be located within bootstrap.css. And I want to try to make that obvious that I'm trying to draw upon this file, bootstrap.css, and I want to try to find the Jumbotron class, which is going to be located within the bootstrap.css. Now, Jumbotron means that I'm going to have a 30 pixel padding at the top of it. I'm going to have padding along the bottom, and I'm going to have a margin that's going to be 30 pixels wide. The color is going to be virtually see-through, but then there's going to be a background color that's going to be kind of grayish, and that's a hexadecimal rating, a CMYK hexadecimal code that will deliver a web-safe color when it renders in the browser. So there's a number of jumbotrons there. Now the jumbotron really refers to what you see when you go to an indoor basketball game, this ginormous screen that is kind of the point of contact for the audience and is kind of the attention-getting, you know, starter for that website. So let's make a class that's inside of that jumbotron that's going to be called a container. That will allow me to kind of go about my business here. Now you can see that there's a div that starts the jumbotron, and then there's a div that kind of encloses the container. And if I want to, I can go to the source inside, and I can try to shift it to the right so that it's a little bit indented. That may help you. So within that container, I want to say, okay, let's make a heading 1, which is really big text, and I'll say, hello YouTube and worlds beyond, and that'll be our little hello world. And then we'll make up a paragraph here which builds in an automatic line break above and below, where I'll say this will be the text visible within the jumbotron, and we'll end that paragraph there. And then something else I'm interested in is I want to make a button. So I'll say I want to make an anchor of class BTN or button, which is listed within my CSS. And then I want this to be using this button primary class that will be of type button large. And if you go on over here, button primary should be located within our bootstrap here. So if we locate button primary, the encoding for button primary is down here on line 3119. So bootstrap is not a trivial, you know, configuration, but this includes the color for the button, the background color for the button, and then the border of the color of the button. So the border will have some, the button will have some personality. And so my href, or the linkage, is just going to go nowhere. It's just going to go to the current page. And then for Bootstrap, we have these things that are called roles, and the role that it's going to play is a button. And the button in Bootstrap is particularly rich. And the button is going to have a caption that will say, learn more. And I'm going to end that up with my A, the end up for the anchor, and that'll be the end of the class as well. And let me see that that was finished up correctly, and then I think that needs to be closed. Yeah, that looks all right. We'll see what it's complaining about. No end tag for the A, and the start A was not closed properly. Let's see. And oftentimes my students find what I'm doing wrong. It's partly the reality of coding in front of people, is sometimes they see what you're doing wrong before you do. Looks pretty good, looks pretty closed. A and close of P, so we'll just back that up. Yeah, it ended up being okay. Sometimes when you press save in Eclipse, it kind of solves your problems for you. So this divs are enclosed at this point, and I want to kind of back that up, and I want to see what I'm doing with it. Now the container, the Jumbotron, closes up with this div, and then the container div closes up here, and then the body is closed. So we should probably be able to load this up. So let's kind of shut that down a little bit. The only thing I'm suspicious of is the fact that the CSS is over here, and then I may need to jump up one one level inside the project. So I may actually, let's show it inside of my System Explorer. And we'll kind of click on that. We'll see if it, now you can see that it's not including any of the styling just yet, which is fine. Now one thing I want to do when I'm working with any given browser is browsers try to make things work faster, and they have what are called caches. And so what it will do is it will take it will take a copy of the page, and instead of reloading the page fresh, it will actually take the older copy. So you can actually make some nice new changes to your page, but you won't see the changes because it has cached the previous copy of the page. So we're going to disable the caches so that it's not going to be doing any caching, and then we're going to empty the caches. And the only change that I'd like to bring is I want to take that index and I want to bring it within the top level of the project so that index is right next door to CSS, and we won't do things inside of web content. So when you think about how that's arranged, that will make it so my index is right next to my CSS, and that will help me to accomplish this, which is an absolute path to the CSS folder. That's easily fixed other ways. You can go like, you can say like this, and that will link it to the absolute identity of it. But I just want to show you that it can be solved a number of ways. So let's see if it's working better for me. And I like this a lot better. This is what's called the Jumbotron, where the text here is ginormous. And you can kind of see how that Jumbotron automatically styles the content inside of it. And so you can see that the width of the container is 100%. So there are no columns inside the Jumbotron. Here the width ends up being 970 because that's the measurement here on my MacBook Air, which is a little smaller. Also, I'm projecting it with the LCD. So that 970 is very modest. That's a little more than half the size of your screens. And then you can see that I've got the padding and the margins as we as we expected. And then I want to take a look at the size of the text. Now this is the body, but as for the Jumbotron itself, the font is literally 63 px. What you guys use for your Word docs to write your papers is about a 12 point. This is a 63 point inside the Jumbo. So you realize that this was coded ahead of time on line 4,982 of the CSS file. I mean, I've coded some long pieces of code, but it's rare that I get up to 4,000 lines. So the bootstrap is really boasting a lot of features right here. And that's way down at the bottom of this thing. I don't even want to scroll down to 4,060, what have you. But that was the Jumbotron's text. So that's just way down there. Now, certain people take the core bootstrap and they actually add hundreds of lines of style to the bootstrap itself. So there are people who will give you a custom bootstrap, which are plentiful out there, and that CSS will be even richer. It's pretty impressive. So I'm going to halt this right now so I keep it easy on my RAM, but I think you've learned a few things. One is the location of your CSS. Two is the content of the CSS is going to configure the HTML. And so the appearance of the HTML comes from the CSS. Third, you're going to use the classes to draw upon and style the content. And then also Jumbotron, H1, the paragraph, and then the button, of course. I mean, shoot. You guys have the beginnings of a user interface where you can click that button and it has a hover so that the color changes when I touch it. So it's a real nice start. You're off and running. So this would be a fun thing for you to do. Take a few minutes. I'll do a few more demos. Just hang tight.